I tell you this, and a lot of coaches won't admit this, but now I'm in sports media, so I can. After you get done with the fall camp, the day of fall camp, God, especially you're in like day 5 or 6, where, you're having to babysit and it's starting to get crazy. The pads are on, whatever. And that into fall practice gets and the head coach rolls out that cooler that he was hiding in the coach's staff locker room with all those Coors Lights and Miller Lights in it. You want to talk about feeling good, about cracking a few cold ones after a hot day of fall camp? We used to weigh ourselves. We'd be like, dude, I lost 8 pounds,
really?
Which apparently is awful for you. But Chris, a lot of coaches do that. I saw some people were like, I can't believe they're doing this. So many coaches do that.
Listen, I said Kane Womack's a psychopath, but I want my defensive coordinator to be a psychopath. I hope he's like one of the craziest guys at practice. So I didn't say I didn't love the move. I just said it was a psychopath move, which, again, it is. But if you're not a psychopath, you can't be my DC.
That's it. I would much rather my defensive coordinator be more Joker than Batman, 100%.
It's like, and Will Muschamp didn't say many good things when he was a head coach, but the one thing he did say, I'd rather have guys I have to tell whoa than to giddy up. That's a good trait to have on defense.
No, without a doubt. Chris, I'm going to start. We started off the show talking about how much parity it feels like there is this year at the top of college football, not even conference specific, but I do want to get conference specific here in the SEC. I mean, I can make the case, and I want to see where you are on this, that 5 teams, maybe even 6, because there's always that sneaky team. Will it be Tennessee? Will it be LSU? Will it be A&M? Will it be Auburn? It won't be Florida. But there's that sneaky team. I can count up to 5 that I feel really good about with Georgia, with Texas, with Bama, with Ole Miss, and yes, with Missouri. Ole Miss and Missouri, I think, have a legitimate chance, and for different reasons, but there are some similarities. Do you agree with me on that, or do you think it's still really only 2 or 3?
No, Jake, I absolutely agree. I mean, right now we're dropping our game-by-game predictions, and I can tell you, and I know you guys don't do that until end of fall camp. You hate fun. I understand, Jake.
We're abstinent until the end of fall camp.
But no, we're dropping those right now. And listen, I hate my predictions because I have 7 teams in the SEC winning 10 or more games. And my predictions are like the ultimate
7
scenario. 7. I've got
so nobody loses a non-conference game. Everybody wins their non-conference.
I've got Texas and Georgia at 11-1, and then I've got Missouri, Ole Miss, Alabama, Tennessee, and LSU all at 10-2. And in my scenario, guys, I think there's a good chance that Ole Miss would get left out of the playoff because of strength of schedule, which, again, ultimate chaos scenario. Maybe it doesn't happen. I'm probably wrong, to be honest. But either way, to your point, Jake, the bottom line is this. There is a ton of parity at the top. I don't think it's just a 2-horse race. I think anything can happen this year. I mean, that's one of the great things about transfer portal and NIL is, teams have been able to strengthen their rosters the way they have. And, you saw that with Ole Miss. You've seen that a little bit with Missouri on the defensive side and the running back position. You've seen that with, all of these contenders. But, I mean, I think when you look at realistic college football playoff contenders, there might be more than 6. There might be more than 7. I mean, maybe Texas A&M sneaks up. Maybe Oklahoma if the offensive line comes together. So the top of the league is as strong, I think, Jake, as it's ever been with those college football playoff contenders this year.
Yeah, I agree.
So you have 7 teams in the SEC going 10-2 or better, and you're saying Ole Miss possibly gets left off. So how many do you have making the playoff?
So I'd have 5. I think there's a chance Ole Miss and Missouri get left out. Because, again, you look at listen, with Ole Miss, and, again, it would have to work out in this perfect scenario. In my scenario, Ole Miss is losing to Georgia and at LSU. At that point, what is their best win? I mean, is it against South Carolina on the road? Is it Oklahoma? I mean, what?
Georgia Southern.
Is it Kentucky? Is it Middle Tennessee State? I mean, what is their best win realistically? I think that's going to be used against them, guys. So it's going to depend on how the rest of college football works out. But, I mean, you guys know as well as I do, if there's 7 10-plus win SEC teams, I admittedly a couple months ago, back early January, whatever, when this 12-team thing, we were first starting to talk about it, I was naive enough to believe, well, I mean, if you win 10 or more games, you're 100% in the playoff as an SEC team. But the playoff doesn't work that way, right? We've got these automatic bids. We've got the G5. We've got at-larges. What happens with Notre Dame? So, I mean, realistically, I think you get 4. Maybe you get 5. Anything more than 5, I think, is unrealistic. So, I mean, listen, if that scenario played out and we're starting to compare schedules, Ole Miss and Missouri, they can be behind the 8 ball if they lose the wrong games.
5's a lot, man.
It is.
5's a lot.
Well, I just wonder, I wonder, David, like, a lot of people root against Notre Dame just because they don't like Notre Dame. But the amount of people that are going to be rooting for Notre Dame to screw up so they don't take a spot from a team from the Big 12, the Big 10, the SEC, or the ACC, is Notre Dame, Chris, is Notre Dame the most hated team on the planet right now? Like, will
Probably
they be?
So. I was thinking there's a lot of SEC fan bases that are going to be pulling for Notre Dame to go down in week 1 in College Station. Just because, again, like you said, if Notre Dame wins that game, schedule sets up well, they probably take a playoff spot from somebody else.
But again, I think that the standard for them is going to be different. Whereas you're saying, I agree with you that 10-2 in the SEC or the Big Ten is going to be a legitimate contender to make the playoff. I don't think that's good enough for Notre Dame. I think they have to go 11-1, which is basically just a shift on what we've seen the past couple years, or I say the last decade in the 4-team playoff. We always kind of said, hey, Notre Dame has to kind of go undefeated or be unblemished to make the playoff. And they know that. They understand that, which is why they continue to not join a conference. But we'll see how it plays out. I do want to ask you, Chris, while I got you, about Shane Beamer in South Carolina. Just personally, obviously, I'm a big Shane Beamer fan. He recruited me when he was at Mississippi State, so I really like the guy. I want him to have the utmost success. 3 seasons so far at South Carolina. He's gone 7-6, 8-5, 5-7, and that was with Spencer Rattler and Xavier Legette last season, who are both playing in the NFL now. What are the expectations for South Carolina this upcoming year? And, do you think that this will be his final year with the Gamecocks?
David, I'll take the second part of the question first. No, I do not think this is going to be Shane Beamer's final year. It would have to reach, what is it, DEFCON 5 or DEFCON 1, the more serious?
I think it goes.
God, I think DEFCON 1's the worst, isn't it?
DEFCON 1 is the worst.
Okay, don't worry, I'll find out. I'll do it. I'll find out.
Yeah, find out, Blaine. Find out.
All right. You figured that out while we're talking about this.
Yeah, I can't wait for the FBI to
way,
show up at Blaine's apartment later after you Googled that.
Things would have to go sideways. I think Shane Beamer at minimum is back in 2025. And guys, I think that's probably, listen, it's tough because in this new world of transfer portal, NIL, patience has completely gone out the window. And I'm not saying that the expectations, the minimum expectation for this year should be to make a bowl game. When you look at that schedule they've got this year, there's essentially 4 kick-in wins with 3 non-conference games. And then the game against Vanderbilt, sorry to our friends in Nashville, but I don't see it happening. So can you go 2-6 against the rest of your schedule? And I know it's a daunting schedule, but you should be able to find a way to notch out 2 W's, whether that's Kentucky and maybe Texas A&M, snap the streak against Missouri, whoever it might be, find a way to go 2-6. And but guys, I think if you look at the history of South Carolina football, they have shuffled coaches for quite a long time. And so I don't know that having a quick trigger, pulling the trigger with Shane Beamer is going to be the right move here. I think there's things Beamer needs to show improvement in. This is a really big year, and I would agree that his seat is warming, but Shane Beamer is a guy, he showed promise early on. They overachieved, right? This is his first head coaching job. And again, once you believe a guy is not the right answer, you need to move on. But until he really shows you it becomes blatantly obvious that, man, we got to go a different direction. The program's trending the wrong way. I think South Carolina needs to ride this thing out and just see what they get out of Shane. Now, again, if the recruiting starts to go south and you continue to lose in the field, you don't have much of a choice. But I think Shane Beamer 100% is back in 2025. And I think the expectation this year, David, to get back to your question, is just get to a bowl game, right, with the young Lenora Sellers and get the most out of him in that offense. They're going to run the football a lot more. You mentioned with no more Rattler Legette. It's going to be a lot of quarterback run game, a lot of Rocket Sanders, a lot of leaning on that offensive line, which should be a lot better. And Lenora Sellers, who is a talent unlike they've had in quite a long time there under center. So see some promise from him, get to 6 wins, build off of that, and set yourself up for what really needs to be a big 2025 season.
But Blaine, I want to get to your question in a minute, but to kind of piggyback off what David said, and you're obviously very tapped in, Chris, to what South Carolina is doing. There was an old show I used to go on where we talked just South Carolina, just me and you. I talk with South Carolina fans all the time. They ask, how we're going to be, and we got Lenora Sellers, and we got Nicholas Harbor, and we got Rocket Sanders, but you just had Spencer Rattler, and you just had Xavier Legette. To me, the question is not just, all right, how do we replace the quarterback and the wide receiver? And they could be great. I think the upside for Lenora Sellers, I'm a buyer on Sellers, pun intended. But up front, on the line of scrimmage, on the offensive line and the defensive line, is South Carolina going to be better than they were last year? Because if they're not, none of this matters.
Jake, it's as they say, it's a tale as old as time, my friend. I mean, it's going to be, listen, it's going to be 100 years from now. The aliens are going to have taken over our civilization, and they're still going to be talking about South Carolina's offensive line and if they're going to be able to block this year. I'm convinced of that because every single year we're having this conversation. Jake, they should be better. I mean, to answer your question, the first thing, they got to stay healthy, right? Had double-digit injuries up front. Nobody could withstand that, right? But they played a lot of young guys last year. Oluwatosin Babalade, Trovon Bowe, Jatavius Shivers. They played some really talented guys, but were true freshmen, and it was baptism by fire, right? You saw a couple of those guys in Knoxville that, I mean, they were just trying to drink water out of a fire hose and never had a chance. But the good news is, and I think Shane Beamer believes this, and I tend to believe this as well, they should be better for the lumps they took last year. Now, I think the biggest question, Jake, when it comes to South Carolina is quality depth, and do those pieces come together, right? I mean, you return 4 or 5 starters from last year up front. There's one of two ways to look at that. Hey, we're going to be really experienced, and those guys should get better. Or you could say we returned 4 or 5 starters from an O-line that was one of the worst in college football. So I tend to think they will take a step forward, but how big of a step? I agree with you, Jake. I think that's what determines South Carolina's success this year.
Yeah. All right, back to the important things. DEFCON 5, all right, means that we are at a complete and total state of peace.
Oh, good.
Have no immediate need to be on
DEFCON
high state of order. DEFCON 1. That's called the critical time.
So that mustache is like a DEFCON 3 then, I would assume.
Yeah, it is.
Look,
You should see it at night.
I feel at peace, honestly.
Thank you.
Yeah, I feel DEFCON 5
I love that
right now.
mustache. I love the stash playing. You're looking good these days.
Well, that's great. As an Auburn guy, I'm just dead inside, so I'm DEFCON nothing.
I can tell. You can tell Hugh Freeze is recruiting well because Blaine looks very zen right now.
He is. He's been staring in the woods.
Obviously, the most question already asked in here after a little fiasco yesterday is they want to know Xbox or PlayStation.
I'm a PlayStation guy, man. PS5 to the moon.
All right, Chris, thanks for coming on.
What a good Wednesday. You're welcome back anytime, buddy.
Blaine, I saw your tweet, man. I was waiting I was hoping you'd bring it up, man. I've been a PlayStation guy from the jump back when I was playing Crash Bandicoot and Spyro the Dragon.
Oh,
man.
yeah.
Crash Bandicoot goes hard.
I have no frame of reference there, but PlayStation.
That Reed beats my ass in Crash Bandicoot when we used to play it when she
Really?
was at her old house. That's all she played. I played Mario Kart.
Yeah, Mario
She played
Kart's
Crash Bandicoot. She used to beat me to death. I used to get so mad. But then I'd get over it.
Yeah, all right, let's go to John Rice. He wants to know, question for you, Chris. Better chance of South Carolina winning 8 games or more or Bama winning 8 games or less?
Shout out my guy, John, by the way. Really good friend of mine, somebody who's followed the show for a while. So South Carolina winning 8 or more or Bama winning 8 or less?
Mm-hmm.
I'm probably going to go Bama winning 8 or less because I think the ceiling, guys. I think the ceiling for South Carolina is probably 7-5.
Can we pull up their schedule?
Yeah, so it's Old Dominion. Yeah, Old Dominion, Kentucky and Lexington, LSU at home, Akron at home, bye week. Ole Miss at home, Alabama on the road, Oklahoma on the road, second bye week. Texas A&M at home, Vanderbilt on the road, Missouri in Columbia, South Carolina, so at home, Wofford at home, and then Clemson is on the road.
Damn.
So, I mean, if you win the non-conference like you were talking about, Old Dominion, Akron, you'd have to beat Wofford. Who else?
And then Vandy would be a 4th win.
Oh, so that's what you were counting.
Yeah,
okay.
Vandy.
Counting Vandy,
So 4. Man, that Kentucky game's massive.
Yeah, I think that's the most important game on their schedule.
Clemson.
I think that's the most important game for both South Carolina and Kentucky.
Yeah, no, it's big. We'll know about Vandegrift early and Sellers and that offensive line.
I mean, that's for the trajectory of Mark Stoops, and if they lose to Beamer for a 3rd straight year, they're going to be on. Well, I probably shouldn't say it in 2024, but you know what? You know what?
Yeah.
All right, let's go to JC. He wants to know, Chris, are you taking the over or under for Oklahoma this season on wins for 7.5?
Man, the Boomer Sooner folks are going to hate me, man.
Do it, Chris. Say it.
Listen, I think that's the perfect number. Right now, I would take the under because I picked 7-5. So, I mean, I would obviously be taking the under. I just think, guys, we've seen this time and time again. When you got questions on the offensive line and a young quarterback, no matter how talented he is,
deadly combo.
It's just not a recipe for success, man. What I worry about, too, is, again, Jake talks about this a lot. It's not your starting 22. It's about your 44. It's about your 66. So what I worry about with the offensive line is we get deeper into the SEC season because I think Oklahoma beats Tennessee in their SEC opener. I really do. I think pieces come together. They're fired up. Josh Heupel's return. I think Oklahoma puts it together and plays one of the best games of the year. But as the season wears on, guys, like inevitably the SEC grind is going to take its toll. And I'll be worried about that offensive line. And I think as they wear down, I think Jackson Arnold, maybe he tries to force some things. And it's just not a recipe for success. And also the schedule is just brutal. I think Oklahoma's going to be a really good team, but I think it's going to result in a 7-5 record.
Yeah, I think looking at Oklahoma in a 3 to 5 year period as opposed to year one coming in with that schedule would make Oklahoma fans feel a lot better. Just to put a bow on this, it's one thing when you're having to start a bunch of young guys on the offensive line who haven't played together, right? That's tough. We talked about South Carolina last year. Oklahoma had to basically replace their whole offensive line. It's not with all young guys. There are some guys that have played snaps, but they haven't played together. And chemistry on the offensive line mixed with a young quarterback who's going to have to rely on that offensive line, especially the center, can cause a lot of problems. That's why I agree with you, Chris, that mixture is a deadly mixture. Now, it may not be as deadly because the Oklahoma offensive linemen they brought into the portal do have experience, but they don't have experience together. And that's the thing really that matters most. There's been a lot of offensive lines that didn't have NFL players that had great chemistry that were good. And there's been a lot of offensive lines that had 2 or 3 NFL players that had no chemistry and were bad because it takes one guy to screw the whole thing up. But Chris, on your first visit, you definitely didn't screw anything up, buddy. Tell everybody where they can find y'all's work. You and Dave and Cole and Blaine, other Blaine, and everybody at SEC Unfiltered doing a hell of a job.
Yeah, Jake, Blaine, David, it was a pleasure, man. We'll have to get you guys back on the show ASAP. But at SEC Unfiltered, a lot of the same places you find Crain and Company, podcast, YouTube, social media, even TikTok, you name it, we are there at SEC Unfiltered.
Well, Chris, congrats on all the success, buddy. Really proud of you and looking forward to getting you back on.
Get an Xbox, Chris.
Thank you guys. Yeah,
all right.
Go
Chris
PS5 anytime.
Yeah. Hey, what's up, YouTube? Do us a favor. If you hate football, don't subscribe to this channel. Just don't do it.